New York City subway system 10 years ago will soon be a free man. Attorney William Stamper says New Yorkers have nothing to fear when his client Najib Boulazazi is released.
I tell you, as you heard me say, that I have no concerns. I have no concerns.
Zazi had faced a sentence of life in prison. He was sentenced to 10 years, which essentially amounts to the time he's already served. Zazi could be out in a couple of days. You're listening to the latest from NBC News Radio.
California headline news. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is accusing Attorney General William Barr of lying to Congress about the Mueller report.
As the Attorney General of the United States of America was not telling the truth to the Congress of the United States. That's a crime.
House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy disagrees, saying Barr has been very transparent. Just days after being wounded in the deadly synagogue attack in Poway, Rabbi Yisrael Goldstein attended the National Day of Prayer service in Washington. He spoke at the White House about what happened.
I found myself in the line of fire, facing the darkest moment of my life and the life of my congregation.
Goldstein says the accused shooter was born without hate, but acquired it somewhere. And finally, San Francisco Mayor London Breed wants to put an earthquake bond on the 2020 primary ballot. The proposal would raise $628 million to fortify critical infrastructure in case of a major earthquake. Steve Clausen, California News.
It may not be stomach issues.
For me, it's intense gas, or pain, or diarrhea, sometimes all at once, over and over.
I spent years with the symptoms, but could never figure it out.
No matter what I did, they never went away. So I decided to break it down for my doctor and get really specific about my symptoms.
We discovered that exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI, may be the reason for my stomach issues.
EPI is caused by my pancreas. It leads to diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, unexplained weight loss, and oily stools. The symptoms just don't go away.
But EPI can show up with even one symptom.
The good news? EPI is manageable.
But to get to the right diagnosis, you have to break it down for your doctor and get specific about the severity of your symptoms.
Visit identifyepi.com to learn more and use the symptom checker to help change the conversation with your doctor. Brought to you by AbbVie.
Individuals and businesses with tax problems, listen carefully. Do you feel like you're losing control over your finances? If you owe over $10,000 in back taxes or have unfiled tax returns, we can help you take back control. The IRS is the largest and most aggressive collection agency in the world, and they can seize your bank account, garnish your paycheck, close your business, and file criminal charges. Take control of your tax problems now by calling the experts at Tax Mediation Services and take advantage of the Fresh Start program and new laws that may allow us to negotiate a settlement for the lowest amount possible. Our team of tax attorneys and enrolled agents can stop collections and get you protected so you can take control of your financial future. Tax Mediation Services is accredited by the Better Business Bureau. Call now for a free case review and a price protection guaranteed quote.
Call Tax Mediation Services now at 800-298-8662. That's 800-298-8662. 800-298-8662.
Are you ready for a new experience? To see life from another point of view? New hope, new expression, new joy. This is your radio hour. Welcome to Viewpoint with Father John.
And welcome, friends. You are tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or on the World Wide Web at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John, and I am your host, Father John Reed. By the way, you can follow the show on both Facebook and Instagram. Just go to Viewpoint with Father John. All of God's children are endowed with extraordinary purpose and ability. I'm on a quest to help as many as possible in fully realizing their divinely inspired potential. Disposing of false narrative and embracing genuineness inspires clarity of purpose. My role is to help overcome self-imposed limitations in realizing one's spiritual potential. And brothers and sisters, Viewpoint with Father John is a listener-supported program. So I ask that you go to viewpointwithfatherjohn.com, click on the support button, and give what you can. And for those of you who've been giving every week, thank you so much. You've been keeping us on the air, and I am grateful to you. Also, I'd like to invite you to buy a copy of my book, Close Your Eyes So You Can See Me. The premise of this book is that we are all God's children and that we do not need more self-improvement. Rather, we need self-discovery. Close Your Eyes So You Can See Me is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and in most online bookstores. So get your copy today. And it's a good surprise gift for anyone you want to give to. And tonight, my guest is Holly Bolinger, and she is an author of the book Blaze, which will be coming out soon and also available on Amazon. And she is also a literary agent. And so, Hope, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Glad to have you. And so let's talk a little bit about the book. What inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, no, great question. So basically, Blaze is a modern-day book of Daniel. And kind of what inspired me was I was sitting in an Old Testament class, and something the prof had said really caught me off guard. She was talking about Daniel and his other friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and she was saying when they were taken into Babylonian captivity, they probably would have been 15 or 16 years old.
Right.
And that really caught me off guard because I was thinking, wow, I had no idea they were that young when they were taken into Babylon and had to go through a 3-year education. And so I was thinking, that sounds a lot like high school. It sounds like they were trying to have their identity stamped out and they were trying to fit them into a certain mold. And the really cool thing about them was that they were still able to stand strong but still really thrive in a completely different culture. And so I wanted to see what that looked like in an American high school.
Oh, that's cool. Well, just a little side note, speaking of that, a lot of people don't realize that Jesus' disciples were all teenagers for the most part. Peter was probably the oldest, along with James and John, but most of them would have been about 15, 16 years old because that was the average age at that time, because most people didn't live past 30 in biblical times. 45 was really considered to be an old person. And so I am absolutely ancient at this point in my life. So tell us a little bit about Daniel's adventure.
Oh, sorry, one more time. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. Tell us a little bit about Daniel's adventure. You were talking about your character of the book and how it made you think about the high school experience now. So how does Daniel deal with this?
Yeah, great question. So essentially what happens in the plot is Daniel is forced to attend his rival school when his school mysteriously burns down. And so he has to tackle lots of issues, anything from bullying to hazing to people just trying to get rid of anything that remained of his past identity at that school. And so he encounters rigorous academics because, schools are just getting harder and harder for students now. They have so much more expectation to do well to get into college. And so he has to deal with that on top of everything. He has to excel in extracurriculars, as is often the case in boarding schools. You have to be able to do a sport and an art really well, so he has to add that on top of it. So he has to balance his school and extracurriculars and social life and try to survive, essentially.
Wow. Yes. Well, that really is accurate to today's adolescent experience. As a priest, I do a lot of funerals. In fact, I've done 8 in the last 5 days, I'm sorry to say. And this last couple of years, I've had more teenagers doing their services because they committed suicide as a result of bullying and losing who they really are. And some of the people I've talked to, some other kids I've talked with, because I do counseling as well, have talked about how different cultures that are coming together kind of bully each other a little bit. Our culture is smarter than your culture, stuff like that. So it could be really tough. Is that a little bit of fit a little bit into the premise of your book?
Yeah, I definitely see those themes definitely show up in the book. And one thing that really interests me about teenagers now are they really are trying to stand up to a lot of these different things. They're really taking notice. You had mentioned that the suicide rate is just out of this world, and so they've taken notice about this, and they're trying to do something about it now. I've never seen a group of teens try to take as much action as teens do now, and so they really did inspire me I really wanted to create characters who were like that.
Well, yeah, and we have some really tremendous teenagers right now. In fact, they're changing the face of the political climate in a way that the adults are really obscuring it. I look at the teenagers from Florida with the shooting that happened last year, and look at what they've done to help change the culture and say, we need to stop this. We need to stop giving power to people making money off children getting killed, the gun industry, and have legislation that makes sense. And they are still going strong. I am very proud of them. And they've taken it beyond a slogan that the children are our future. They're making it happen. And I'm very proud of them for that. And we need them desperately because we adults are really letting the teenagers down right now. And they seem to be a lot smarter than we are. So you started writing this book. How long ago did you start working on this project?
So I got this inspiration my tail end of my freshman year in college, and so the summer going into my sophomore year, I decided to write it. And it was also a bad decision to do that because I was working 4 jobs at the time and taking a couple of summer classes. So it was a little crazy, but we were able to write it in about 45 days, and
wow.
Then it was a very crazy summer. There was very little sleep to be had, but but I got it ready in time because a group of us professional writing majors went to a conference that next fall, and I pitched it to the publisher who would eventually take it on.
Was this Taylor University?
Yep. So super tiny school in the middle of a cornfield, but they have a really obscure program called professional writing in which you just focus on publishing, because that's really what I wanted to get into. I wanted to find ways to help people get their stories told, and that's why I pursued it.
Because you're also a literary agent, is that correct?
That is correct. Ever since I was 16, when I started writing novels, I really wanted to land a literary agent myself, just because I really wanted to get into that traditional route, and can sometimes be just really tricky to do unless you have a really big following. So I tried getting a literary agent, and I learned very quickly that it's really hard to do. And so I really wanted to find out how to become one, and so I can figure out how to help those people with really strong voices, those marginalized voices that we're seeing come out now, be able to hit the print and be able to be in the hands of readers.
So how come you're not handling my book?
I mean, you can send it to me if you really want.
Yeah, you know, I had to represent myself, and I did land a contract, but one of my publishers, when Borders went out of business, when they filed bankruptcy, they put my publisher out of business. And so, so after the show, you and I will talk. So we might do a reprinting. So tell us a little bit more about your book, and what would you like for the listeners to kind of grasp from our conversation right now? What would they learn from this book?
What can they learn from this book? A couple of different things they can learn from this book. They can really learn what it looks like to stand strong in your identity, especially when you're thrust into a situation in which not only is everyone seemingly different than you, but they're trying to make sure that you are not different. That is the main lesson. If anyone reads the book, that is what I want them to take away. But also, what I really wanted to present was, in the book, there are a lot of characters who are Christians, and I really want to present Christians that are not the typical Christian mold that you see in a lot of Christian literature. I just because one thing I've noticed, especially going to Taylor University, is we read a lot of books for book reviews that were Christian in nature, and a lot of times the characters just seemed like they were pressed out of the same mold. And I really wanted some characters like friends I had in high school who were believers, but were just very different than what you would just picture as a typical believer.
Yeah, and I think that's very important because of the fact that it shouldn't be a cookie-cutter identification of faith, because it's supposed to be expressed in many different ways as individual as we are. And I think a lot of people miss that. And I think it's true that we have to be careful of identification unification, where everybody looks the same, because that's not how we're created. I mean, after all, if every snowflake is different, I think we're supposed to be too. You know, but what do I know? I'm an old Irishman, you know. Yeah. Well, that's cool. That sounds like a really neat book. And in just a couple of minutes, we're going to go to our first commercial break. But so as you go into this, does this start in Daniel's freshman year, or is he midway through high school? Where does he start out?
I started him off in his sophomore year just so we could hit that 3-year program nicely. It's supposed to be a trilogy, so essentially I chopped the book of Daniel up into 3 sections. This book kind of leaves off at the fiery furnace section. The next book leaves off in the lion's den. And then the last one is all those fun visions that happen at the tail end.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people may not be familiar with what you're talking about in the fire. And of course, I do, because I know about, we talk about the clay feet and all that stuff. And the burning of Daniel and how it scared the king, the fact that Daniel would not burn in the furnace. Right. He must have been Irish too. And so we put so much whiskey inside of us that nothing will burn. So his school has been burned up, and if I'm hearing you correctly, and the new building of the school, they're trying to lump everybody in as just one personality. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, so they're just essentially trying to survive in their environment. But the problem is there's an arsonist kind of going around, and so they're trying to figure out who exactly burned down the school, because they don't quite seem content with just burning down one thing. So on top of not only just trying to survive this horrible experience at this new school, they're also trying to figure out who's setting fire to things, because they might be the next victims.
Wow, that's quite a storyline.
Yeah, I've been following a little bit of a pyromaniac, so it definitely feeds into the storyline.
No, that's really cool. I think it gives people something to relate to, that's for sure. Well, we are coming up to our first commercial break, and Frank's looking at me through the glass like if we don't go to commercial, he's going to be an arsonist and give me a hot foot. And so my guest this evening is Hope Bolinger. Am I saying your last name correctly? It can go 2 ways.
Bolinger, but everyone pronounces it every which way.
And so we'll be back in 2 and 2 to continue our conversation.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org. www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran-owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, K292FQ Riverside, and K293CF Moreno Valley.
Now, here's a new concept: digital network advertising, where businesses display your ad inside their building. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, your company is going to thrive with digital network advertising. Choose your marketing sites or jump on the DNA system and advertise with all participants. Your business ad or logo is rotated multiple times an hour inside local businesses where people will discover your company. Digital network advertising. DNA, a novel way to be seen and remembered. Digital network advertising with networks in Redlands and Yucaipa. Call in the 909 area 222-9293 for introductory pricing. That's 909-222-9293 for digital network advertising. One last time, digital network advertising, 909-222-9293.
And welcome back. You are tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or on the World Wide Web at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John, and I am your host, Father John Reed. And I want to give a shout out to all of our listeners around the world that do listen to us online and on YouTube. By the way, if you want to catch this again on YouTube tomorrow, just go to Viewpoint with Father John, KCAA, and it'll come up right there. You get all of our past shows. And we have a new sound engineer tonight, our good friend Frank, and he's soloing tonight. How you doing tonight, Frank?
Father John, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Welcome to the booth.
Thank you.
Well,
my first solo.
As we call it, the torture chamber.
Torture chamber, only when you're here, Father John.
That's right. That's right. That's because I bring stuff from the Crusades with me.
Like Oreos.
I'm going to show you what the real Iron Maiden was. It wasn't just a rock group. So anyhow, my guest tonight is Hope Bolinger. And how do you like it said? Because you said it said both ways, but it's kind of funny to me.
I'm sorry, one more time. The reception here is terrible in Ohio.
Oh my goodness, yes, and I was too lazy to drive over there today. I said, how do you prefer your last name pronounced? Because I know they say it both ways, but it's kind of important for people looking for your book.
Yeah, so a little bit about the writing process of the book is I essentially wrote it in about 45 days. I tried to write this modern-day Daniel and I try to do about 3,000 words a day, and I finished it within that amount of time. And essentially the story, for anyone who wasn't here before the break, is I placed the book of Daniel in a high school. Essentially, this kid, Daniel, is forced to go to a rival school when his school mysteriously burns down. So he has to figure out the identity of the arsonist before the arsonist figures out him.
Yeah, so that sounds like it's a real thriller there. And 3,000 words a day. Goodness, that's a high goal. Do you run into writer's block at all?
No, that is an excellent question. I actually run a number of columns on writer's block because I personally deal with severe depression. So I face that writer's block every single day when I get up. So I definitely, weekly in the Serious Writer newsletter, in our Kyle Young newsletter, everywhere I can, even some Writer's Digest articles, I've tried to provide solutions that I found to be helpful for myself because it's real. A lot of authors say that writer's block isn't real, but once they hit it, it really definitely feels like a tangible thing.
No, it is real. I'm working on my second book right now, and I go through times of writer's block. In fact, I need to pick up the pen again, as we say in the field, and get moving forward on this again, because you never know what's going to cause the block. And you said something very important about the depression, and I want to segue on that a little bit, if you don't mind, because many writers suffer from depression, as do many entertainers. Look at Robin Williams and some of these famous people. One of my favorite journalists, Mike Wallace, suffered from great depression, almost ended his career. And I always admired him for coming out and speaking publicly about his fight with depression, to let people know it's okay to take an antidepressant. It may save your life. You don't ask to be depressed. It is a medical issue.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that a lot, especially going to college in a major that was very specific to writers. Everyone had lots of mental health history. For sure, I knew lots of writers who dealt with depression, anxiety. It got to the point where it would be so severe that they just couldn't write. And so I definitely, on top of being an advocate for different social issues that will be brought up in books and have been brought up in plays, I'm also a very big mental health advocate because I've been there, I'm there every day, and I want to help people walk through it.
Good. That's a great endeavor. Another thing I found in a lot of the, not just writing field, but entertainment industry is addiction, whether it's drug addiction or alcoholism. And I've worked with a number of people, and of course I don't give out identifications of them, who have struggled greatly with addiction in addition to all the other stuff. So that's great. So does Daniel deal with some of these issues as well in your book?
Yeah, I mean, I try to, and throughout the series, I try to tackle as many social issues as I possibly can, just because I have a lot of fire within me that I definitely want to touch on a lot of these topics. But yeah, the four friends all deal with something. It can be any range from addiction to several of them do deal with mental health history. Throughout the series, I do tackle suicide at one point. I tackle school shootings at one point. I want to cover the gambit because I really want to cover issues that are very prevalent to teens right now.
Wow, that's great. Well, I know when you and I were communicating back and forth when we first met online, that's not how it sounded, folks. It meant through Instagram and things along those lines. I just realized how that sounded, but as soon as I said it, sorry about that. I'm considerably older than she is. So, but you were talking about the importance of social justice to you, and that's one of the things that caught my attention for doing a little research to have you on as a guest on the show. And so, if I'm hearing you correctly, Daniel deals with some of these social justice issues. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Talk about that for a moment, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times when you encounter Christian literature, they'll try to provide a very clear-cut solution. I don't necessarily always do that in the book, but I want to show characters who are dealing with these things, just kind of on a daily basis. That's just their reality, and how they kind of cope with that. I have a character who has severe depression, and she copes with it by engaging with art. That is how she's able to kind of channel everything that she's dealing with. So,
how does she deal with it? I'm sorry, I missed part of that.
Oh, totally fine. She deals with it by engaging with art. She
art.
able to, she's able to work through a lot of that through her art. My main character, Danny, my Daniel character, she deals with severe anxiety. And so she has to learn kind of how to deal with that too throughout the book, and honestly it's a really big conflict for him most of the book on how to actually handle that. So although I don't necessarily provide clear-cut solutions, I kind of show them where they're at and how they are trying to live with that reality.
Well, my experience has been there are no clear-cut solutions. Each one needs its own individual thing, and I think one of the mistakes that gets made is when people do try to do the, and I hate using the term over and over again, but it's applicable, is cookie-cutter solutions, because they don't fit for every situation. You know,
right.
That's one of the things that drives me crazy. As soon as we have a campus shooting, when they say we offer thoughts and prayers, well, okay.
Right.
You know, if you want a hot dog, why don't you lock yourself in the closet, do some thoughts and prayers, and see if it comes through the keyhole? You know.
Right. Yeah.
We had to put some action with it. Now, with some of the stuff that people deal with, do any of the kids deal with the issue of cutting?
Not specifically in the four main characters. I am planning on having a character in the third book deal with something very similar to that, a sort of self-harm sort of thing. But yeah, that definitely is, that's definitely prevalent. Addiction is prevalent. There's a lot of characters who deal with drug use or alcohol abuse. That shows up a lot. But yeah, definitely I talk about mental health, especially in the first book. Mental health is just a really big key theme.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so while Daniel's trying to find out who the arsonist is before the arsonist finds out who he is, so Daniel's kind of a detective at the same time, is that right?
Yeah, he is. The fun thing about the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego characters is I made them girls. So, and one of them he definitely has a crush on, so he definitely can be a bit protective. He goes into that sort of protective friend mode, especially around the one girl he really likes. But yeah, I really wanted to see kind of what would look like for those characters to be transformed in a modern context. I just basically took their Hebrew names, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and then just kind of transformed them to Hannah, Michelle, and Raya.
That's cool. That's cool. And so, in following this storyline in the new school, there's identification problems. Is that correct? Were you saying that earlier?
Identification problems with the arsonist?
Or with blending in the new school?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So they have a really strong sense of place in their old school. They just really have a big sense of school pride in the place they came from. And when they're going to this rival, they have a nasty rivalry. And so they're trying to stamp out any part of what school they used to be a part of. And in some ways, you have to blend to survive, or you can try to stand out and find ways to succeed in that. And so they choose the harder path, which is to stand out and choose to stay strong, stay solid in their integrity when certain characters try to sway them to make certain decisions. So that is the identity that is attempting to be stamped out by the new school.
Wow, I don't know if you intended this or not, but you know, if you really took a snapshot of time where we are right now, we seem to be doing that with society, with people who come to America, immigrants, and trying to remove their cultures and the idea of assimilation, which was never the idea originally. We were called the melting pot originally, where people can bring their identifications and their traditions, and we learn from each other, their customs. And right now we're in kind of a climate where that's happening just all across America. I don't know if you intended to show that or not, but it sure seemed to be apropos at the moment. Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was thinking about some of those issues when I was writing it, especially if you think about back in the context of when the book of Daniel was written. They were coming from another country into Babylon, and
Right.
Babylon was trying to make them Babylonians. They weren't cool with them being Israelites. They wanted them to become integrated into the new culture, but they had to get rid of their previous culture. And you definitely see that happening now in the United States. Definitely.
Well, you know, poor Frank is going through that right now. He's being assimilated into this show. This is his first week soloing. You know, he's taking over from my buddy Nick, and so we're trying to take away his culture background and making him do everything the way this show does. And I'm driving him crazy tonight. Poor guy's in there. My goal is to make him as bald as Nick was by the time the show's over. By him pulling out his hair.
Yeah, I mean, also, I had a thought. I'm trying to remember what I had something. Oh, I'm forgetting. I guess it's, sorry, my brain doesn't work too well late into the night, but I'll come to it. I'll remember it at one point.
Wait till you get my age. It doesn't matter what hour it is. It doesn't work well. So the Babylonians are trying to make the Israelites to be who they are, not who they were. The strong rivalry. And how are the kids come to new school responding to this? Are they filled with fear? Or is it anger? What is Daniel and Daniel's classmates dealing with? What are the emotions?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a lot of fear just because pretty much right off the bat, as soon as they're integrating to the school, there's a major hazing ceremony that happens in the book. And so it's a very clear message is sent that you either assimilate or you're going to get majorly hurt. And so there's a lot of fear that kind of goes into it. The characters quickly learn how rigorous the academics are, and there are even stricter guidelines for anyone who's transferring from another school.
Mm-hmm.
And so they run the risk of getting really poor grades that look awful when you send it to a college or a potential university you want to apply to. And so they are basically entering this environment with a lot of fear. They just are contaminated with this fear.
Wow, that's pretty strong. I think Frank wanted to ask you a question, but his microphone wasn't working. Did you have something you wanted to ask her? There you are.
There I am. Okay, you gotta love technology and funky buttons. And so I was just curious if any of the specific characters were representing. You might have touched on this a little bit, but if they were representing you specifically in certain ways, or like, did you express yourself in any of the characters?
Yeah, no, that's always a great question. I mean, I love it when people ask authors this question. I would say none of the characters are exactly like me. You do definitely pour yourself into each and every character. So you can see aspects of yourself in these characters. But I would say of the 20 books I've written, these are probably the most organic characters I've come up with. Almost none of them have any inspiration from anyone I know, besides the historical figures of Daniel and his 3 friends. But I mean, maybe people will see more of me than I saw in there. Maybe I don't see those aspects of myself, or I'm not as self-aware as I was, I guess.
Well, there's still time for that. That's for sure. You know, people think that when we graduate high school or even graduate high school that we're supposed to be really self-aware. And, you know, I went as far as to get a PhD, and it took a lot longer than that for me to find self-awareness, because we are developing individuals, and we're never just one thing as the years go on. I mean, think of when you were a little child, things that you used to like that now you don't like. You know?
Right. Oh, it's so true. Absolutely true. I love the book Anne of Green Gables because she talks about how there's so many Annes within her. And I think that's really true of any person, is there's so many of one person. There's so many hopes within me. I suppose there's a lot of hopes within me too, you know.
Well, I always say I'm the Sybil of the priesthood. Some of you are too young to know about that. Sybil was someone who had 16 personalities.
Wow.
And it was a great work of art for literary work, but that was 3 or 4 generations ago. back when I was young and I heard about it from somebody else, of course. Well, we're coming up to our next commercial break, and my guest this evening is the author, Hope Bolinger. Now, say it correctly, the proper pronunciation.
Bolinger, so it's like you're going for a game of bowling, and then there's like a tiger at the end of it. So
Bolinger. So I said it right the first time, and I screwed it up the second time. There you go. See, that's the Irish for you. So we'll be back. We'll be back in 2 and 2 to continue our conversation.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org. www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran-owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
This is KCAA.
Welcome back. You are tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or on the World Wide Web at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John, and I am your host, Father John Reed. And just a reminder, this is a listener-supported program, so if you would go to www.viewpointwithfatherjohn.com, click on the support button and give whatever you can. And those of you who've been giving, I thank you very much for your contributions. Also, I'd like to invite you to pick up your copy of Close Your Eyes So You Can See Me. And my guest this evening, as I try to put on the right lips for this commercial break that we just ended, is Hope Bolinger. There you go, I got it right that time. And she is the author of the book Blaze. She's also a literary agent. And Hope, when is this book going to be released?
This book is going to be released on June 3rd. It is up for pre-order right now.
Yes, and I did see that on Amazon, so I would like to recommend that you do go to Amazon.com and pre-order your copy, because you're going to be there anyhow buying a copy of my book as well. So might as well kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Of course, it's not nice to throw stones, but that's okay. That's for another show. So in our last segment, what are some of the things you'd like to communicate to the listeners to help them understand why this is a really good book to buy?
Sure. So if listeners are fans of all things fire, boarding school dramas, or are interested to see what it would look like to take the story of Daniel and place it in a modern high school, that could be the type of reader that this story appeals to, or readers who are interested in a story that tackles social issues, especially, or what does it look like for a believer to tackle social issues.
Fantastic. Now, in addition to the arsonists that they're chasing, what are some of the other social issues that are really standing out in this thing that need to be addressed by these heroes of the story?
I would say the biggest ones, at least in book one, that I see, bullying is a huge one. Another social issue is just kind of the lack of voice that teenagers have when it comes to just administrations or rules that have always been in place that don't necessarily have to. And that is one of the bigger things that I also try to put in there as well. And then, yeah, those would be the two biggest, are bullying and then teenagers having a lack of voice, people not taking them as seriously just because they think they're too young or too young to make an informed decision.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I'm with you on that. And when you said about the rules, now you're talking about the written rules or implied rules, or both?
I would say both. I mean, definitely both are present in the book. When they go to the rival school, they receive a handbook that's 46 pages of rules, so they definitely have a physical copy available for them. But there's just a lot of implicit things that happen at the school that are just always known to be okay, or that they have to go along with it because the school just has a lot of sway over the academic community. And so if you step out of line, then your academic career is basically in jeopardy.
That sounds like the book of Leviticus, where there's 618 rules you have to follow every single day in the book of Leviticus. And that's part of what was considered a sinner back in the time of the Old Testament, was that if you couldn't pay your temple tax, and if you couldn't follow all 618 rules every single day. And it sounds like that's a little bit of what's going on in this new school. They have all these rules, and some that are in that book and some that aren't in that book, that they expect you to know by osmosis, if nothing else. Wow, that's really cool. That's really cool. Now, does any of Daniel's friends get injured during this process, or do they band together? How do they tackle this?
Yeah, I mean, they all definitely receive a sort of injury of sorts, whether it be sort of psychological, or a couple of them may or may not end up in a burning room at one point. We don't know. We'll have to read and see. But, yeah, they definitely all have stakes that they have to reconcile with their decisions to ignore certain rules or to stand up for themselves. So, and various friends have various levels of courage. We even have one who's very shy and very kind of follows the rules, and she has to at one point decide when it's okay to stand up and not follow something that isn't okay.
Wow, that's great. And I love the way you answered that you have to read the book to find out some of this. That's great. That's a perfect answer. I couldn't have written that one better myself. Well done. Well played. Now, are you, you said there's going to be 3 volumes of this book, so it's a triactive writing. So each one's going to go further into the character, or is it going to follow them after high school, or what's your plans with the trinity of this episode?
Yeah, so each one is just a different year of high school, so it takes them through their sophomore to senior years, and each one kind of tackles a different issue. So this one is kind of predominantly about bullying and about administrations taking more control or abusing certain rights against teens, and then the next book tackles a different issue, and the next tackles a different issue, but it's just basically kind of highlighting a lot of people who are just kind of voiceless or don't have a chance to have a speaking platform because they're marginalized in some way.
Wow, that's great. That really sounds exciting. Like those are going to be some fabulous books. Now, not to give too much away, but in any of these books, are any of the characters, where in the book 1, 2, or 3, going to have to deal with sexual assault or anything along those lines? Or have you thought about that?
Yeah, that is a very heavy theme in the second book. Second book tackles a lot of heavy themes, but yeah, that is definitely one of the ones that we do tackle in that one.
Wow, because I think that's such an important topic to handle, particularly in today's climate. I'm glad that we're having the Me Too movement. I think it's very important. I think it's a long time coming. At the same time, it's going to have to find its balance, which it will. Water always finds the right level at some point. But I'm glad you're going to address that, because it's one of those things that is, for one, is greatly misunderstood, two, poorly handled by a lot of different points of view, and three, needs to really be a conversation that as a community we have more and more of, and not pretend there's not a problem. Because when I grew up, and I know that was back in the Stone Age, people just didn't talk about it. And that's a shame, because people were getting hurt left and right.
Right.
And the attitude of the authorities was act like nothing ever happened. And
right.
I was thinking about that the other day, about some of the cruel things that would be said that in hindsight you could see, that really is unthinking, that we have really been slow to learn from such a terrible situation. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's part of the reason why I write kind of the way I write. I'm a little bit of a boat rocker. I really like discussions. I got a philosophy minor at Taylor University because I just really want to kind of challenge people's ideas about things that we kind of always thought were the same way, but we haven't really thought about why. And so I definitely wanted to just make these books a platform to tackle these hard discussions that no one has really talked about until now. Especially the Me Too movement is especially huge. I mean, our university dealt with something at the tail end of last summer, so it definitely hit home very hard. So
say that
I
last part
definitely
one
wanted
more.
to talk about this.
Say that last part one more time, because my earphone was going in and out a little bit.
Yeah, so our university dealt with a Me Too issue that was very close to our major and just hit home really hard. It really hit us majors hard because it was someone in our department, and a lot of these issues do hit home hard because there was sort of an effort to not talk about it and to not address it. And so I want to tackle these hard things. I want to have these difficult discussions. I want people to challenge my worldview, and I really want to challenge theirs, and so we can grow together. And that is a big purpose of why I write.
Well, it sounds like your book might be a really good platform for group discussion. Do you feel that would be a good use for your book?
I mean, that would be a dream come true. I love it when people discuss and when they present ideas that are just vastly different from one another and where ideas get challenged. I know that I went into college with different ideas than when I came out because of these abilities to have discussions. That would be a dream come true if it was a discussion book.
Have you considered, once the book is available, starting an online discussion deal that readers of your book, can come together and exchange ideas online? But of course, some rules of no bullying each other and stuff like that, of course. And unfortunately, we're in a climate where you really have to put those rules into play. But have you considered doing that with your book?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely considered that. I've reached out to a number of book groups that are in my area. I'm a part of a couple book clubs, and I've been able to connect with a couple of high school teachers who might offer the book on their outside reading list to potentially use that as a discussion. So that's a really good idea. I should definitely focus more on developing that, but it has crossed my mind for sure.
I think you'll find that to be a lot of fun. As a fellow author, when my book has been used that way, I found it to be really neat. In fact, there was a group out in Covina, California, that asked me to come be a part of their book group for the time that they went through my book so that they can ask me questions about different things I wrote in it. And it really was a neat experience to have people share with me what they were taking away from the writing, helped me grow a little bit. And right now in my area, there's a group of men who are trying to grow spiritually together that are doing the same thing, that are using the book as a guide for them. So I want to encourage you in that, because it really can be rewarding as an author to see some of those insights. And there'll be some things where people will say some things that you think, where in the world did you get that idea from? Because people are individual, and they do get different thoughts. So I want to encourage you with that. And it sounds like it's going to be a neat book to read. Are you working on any other projects right now?
Oh, goodness, so many. Oh, yeah. So I have a couple different projects I am working on. I have a couple other teen books. One is a time travel book. One is a romance book that I co-authored with another author friend. I have a couple children's books that tackle every single topic from learning to kind of branch out if you're shy to even one that actually tackles depression, because depression is starting to become widespread in younger ages.
Yes.
So, yeah, I'm trying to think any other books that my agent currently has or that's on query. I have another book that's sort of speculative teen fiction, and then I was going to start co-authoring with my friend a nonfiction book, but we have to sort of refine that a little bit. But, yeah, so always writing, always have some project I'm working on for sure.
Well, that's cool. Now, you're also a literary agent yourself. What would be some advice you'd give to people who are listening who are also writers and trying to break into the field of writing?
Yeah, I have a lot of suggestions. First one would be if you can somehow connect with the agent on a personal level, for instance, being on a radio show together or, or meeting them at a conference or just even reaching out to them on social media just to connect and see what they're looking for. If they have that personal contact with you, they're more likely to take a longer look at your manuscript as opposed to sending a form rejection or just no reply at all. That would be a big thing. Just having a couple eyes take a look at the manuscript. I've gotten a number of submissions where just the first sentence had a grammatical error or had a misspelling. Mm-hmm. And that would be a thing, making sure just that first page just grabs you by the throat, that you just have to keep reading. That first page is everything, and it's a lot of pressure on writers. Trust me, I totally know. But just refining that first page. And then a new phenomenon in the publishing world, which somewhat breaks my heart, but I understand why, is platform building, making sure to have as much of a social media following or a lot of speaking engagements. Just building your tribe is huge right now in publishing. And so a lot of literary agents really look to make sure that you have a platform to speak or to reach an audience, because what we've noticed is when we submit stuff to publishers, they often get back saying, this is a really great book, we love the message, but they don't have a big enough platform, and this is why we're rejecting it. And we've gotten so many of those letters. Crazy.
Wow. Now that's good information to have. Now, there's another thing I think that writers need to be aware of. If your literary agent is asking you for an upfront fee, it's a scam.
Run. Yes.
You'd be surprised how many on LinkedIn, and this isn't a knock on LinkedIn. I use that platform quite a bit, but I've been approached by different supposed literary agents for different works that I'm doing. And then, of course, they want you, well, why don't you hook up with this person that works with me? They'll work out a fee with you. Or they say, well, we want to put this in the works, but this is what we're going to have to charge you to do that. And so, right away, it's a scam, but obviously it's working with some people. And then people work their brains out and then come to find out that they were taken for their money.
Right. Yeah, an agent is supposed to make money when you do. So they usually offer a percentage. Usually the standard is 15%. So if you get an advance of $100,000, they would get $15,000 of that. But they're not supposed to make money until you do. So if an agent is offering to represent you, but they're making you pay a fee, run as fast as you can.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we're talking about that, because I do have listeners all around the world to the show. I was talking with Frank before the show that, we have people as far as Brazil and Panama and Philippines listening to the show right now. And some of them are really working hard to try to break into the writing field, and they don't know that legitimate agents never charge an entrance fee or a fee to read your manuscript.
Right. Oh, you see reading fees all the time now. And yeah, run from those agents too. We read, it's part of our job. Granted, we don't make money usually when we're reading, but it's part of the job. And so if they're charging reading fees, they're not a legitimate agent.
Yes, and so thank you for saying that, because I hate seeing people get ripped off. We're really trying to do something. One of the other things, and I'd like to get your input on this, but what I was told, and you said very well with a second set of eyes on it, make sure it's well edited before you submit it to anybody, especially someone that you're trying to get as an agent. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. One thing I often will be on staff at a conference, and they will do this thing, is it's called sort of first page American Idol sort of thing. And so there's a panel of agents, and they will have a reader read the first page of an anonymously submitted manuscript. And the agents will raise their hands when they stop reading. And a lot of times it's just because the writing wasn't edited, or they didn't have another pair of eyes, or they didn't even run it through spell check. I mean, there are some really great story ideas. I get really excited when they hit my inbox, and then you pull up the writing and you see there are about 10 misspellings within the first page. So that usually can turn off an agent to a manuscript, because they know there's a lot of work to be done before you can present it to a publisher.
Well, my first publisher said they had trouble following my stick figures that I put in there. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. I'm joking. Well, you've been a great guest tonight, and I really appreciate it. My guest this evening is the author of the book Blaze, which is available for purchase right now. If I can get my vocabulary back together. I rented it out earlier to somebody else. And so I really want to recommend that you go to Amazon.com and that you pre-order your copy of Blaze. Hope Bolinger is my guest. And how would you like to give them a way that they could get in touch with you if they're interested in talking to you about some of their literary work or some of the other works that you're doing?
Absolutely. So if you hop on over to my website, Hope Bolinger, spelled BOLINGER.com. I have my submissions guidelines there, so it's under the instructions tab, or you can find all my social media handles there, or if you want to check out my crazy blog where we talk about all things fire and publishing, that's also available there as well.
Very good. Well, I appreciate you being on the show tonight. And by the way, her last name is with one L, not two. So it's important that you know that, because spell check will try to put you with a second L, and I had to keep correcting it. And so for all of you who tuned in tonight, thank you for spending another hour with us with Viewpoint with Father John. And if no one's told you this week that they love you, let me be the first. I want to give a big thanks to Frank for being a great sound engineer tonight. Welcome aboard, Frank.
Thank you, Father John.
And I want to give thanks to Gabby for being a great producer and getting me here. And she made sure I wore a clean shirt and everything. And we'll be back with you again next week on Viewpoint with Father John. In the meantime, have a healthy week. God bless.
KCAA Loma Linda. Listen on 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, and 106.5 FM. Are you determined to lose a few inches around the belly area, but you can't seem to get it done regardless of how much you exercise? Now there is a safe and easy way to use a topical gel called TC1 Gel that can help. It's a thermogenic gel that you rub on your waist 15 minutes before exercising. Then simply put on the TC1 sweat belt and start your workout. You'll sweat like crazy and feel the fat burning away. TC1 Gel boosts circulation, increases